Proposed jury instructions that we can wait a witness, I guess, right? Yeah, we all ready, Your Honor.
State ready?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, let's bring the jury in. Good morning. Hi, Shelley.
Quiet, Your Honor.
Please be seated. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back. I hope you had a nice weekend. Before we get started this morning and while you're settling in, I'm going to ask you my questions. If your answer is yes to any of my questions, please raise your hand. During the weekend recess, did any of you have any discussions amongst yourselves or with anybody else? No hands are being raised. Did any of you read or listen to any radio, television, or newspaper reports about the case? No hands are being raised. Did any of you use any type of internet device to go on the internet to do independent research about the case, people, places, things, or terminology? No hands are being raised. And finally, did any of you read or create any emails, text, Twitters, tweets, social networking blogs, or pages about the case? No hands are being raised. Thank you very much. The state may call your next witness.
Thank you, Your Honor. Please report. We call Dr. Hirotaka Nakasone.
Can we have a matter to address briefly at the bench regarding this witness, just for...
If you'll please approach.
Sure, thank you.
you raise your right hand, please? Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you shall give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you.
Good morning. You may proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor. Morning, Doctor.
Good morning, Ms. Monte.
If you would, please go ahead, tell the ladies and gentlemen of the jury, first, how to spell your name. Secondly, where you work and what you do.
My name is Hirotaka Nakasone, Hirotaka. Last name is Nakasone. Currently, I'm assigned to the Operational Technologies Division of the FBI in Quantico, and he performs a variety of duties as a senior scientist. I conduct a research and development activities for the development of automated speaker recognition systems, and also as a collateral duties I perform on routine basis, voice-related forensic examinations, including speaker recognition, speech analysis, and acoustic analysis of signals we encounter, including gunshots analysis. And lastly, also as a senior scientist, I provide advice, guidance, recommendations for the operational technology divisions and other FBI field office.
Dr. Nakasone, how long have you been in your current position?
Since 2009, as a senior scientist for 4 years, and prior to that, I was also hired in a similar, position since 1996.
Tell ladies and gentlemen of the jury essentially what it is that you have done, how long you've been in this field, and what has made you sort of qualified to hold your current position.
Well, initially, when I was doing my PhD thesis at Michigan State University, I got into this forensic speaker recognition as part of my thesis under Professor Oscar Toshi. And when I graduated with the PhD degree, I taught at Michigan State as an assistant professor for 18 months or so. And after that, I moved to Los Angeles County Sheriff Department in Los Angeles, California, to take up a federal research project for the development of computer-assisted voice identification system. I stayed at Los Angeles County Sheriff Department for 7 years, since 1985 to 1992. And my title with the Sheriff Department was voice specialist. And then consequently, I joined FBI in August of 1992 for the same responsibilities, type of the work I did. And I think I was qualified by the FBI to conduct forensic examinations on the audio evidence in 1994. And ever since, I've been doing this kind of work until today.
Doctor, have you mentioned a PhD thesis. Have you done research in this field independently of just your work?
Yes, my first independent, scientific work would be my own, PhD thesis. Thesis was titled as a automatic speaker recognition by using deviation spectra. And when I moved to Los Angeles, the research grants was provided to continue my work as I, wrote in the thesis under the project name titled CAVIS, Computer Assisted Voice Identification System. Then when I joined the Bureau, I started specific modernization effort of the FBI's technique to do voice identification. Until 1997, since early part of the 1960s, FBI was using so-called spectrographic voice comparison, or commonly known as voice prints. And it was getting to be very ineffective to establish a scientific validity because of the subjectivity in the examination involved. So 1997, I was charged to look into modernized, speaker recognition technology. So after that, I initiated a lot of research projects to identify any existing technology viable for forensic applications. I published a variety of papers related to speaker recognition technologies.
If you had to estimate for us how many, I'll call them peer-reviewed articles or papers you've published over the years, what would that number be?
I really never counted thoroughly, but maybe 30 or 40.
Okay. And as far as your actual work in lab for both the FBI and the other agencies that you've described, how many actual voice samples have you attempted to conduct identification on over the years?
I can give you just a rough idea. Judging from the fact that I handle anywhere from 40 to 80 cases per year, and if I worked for the Bureau, that would amount to 1,400 cases. But since I've been working for more than 10 years or so, my best guess would be probably I have to handle and analyze and written report somewhere in the neighborhood of 3,000 cases. That will involve maybe 5 times of the number of the voices.
Have you ever testified in courts before as an expert in the field of forensic speaker recognition?
Yes, I have. However, most of the time when I testify in the courtroom, I never testified to the results of the analysis and the examination that I conducted. Rather, I was requested to testify in the court to talk about the reliability and scientific foundations of speaker recognition technologies.
And how many times would that be?
Somewhere around 25 to 30 times.
Okay. Would that be both state and federal court?
Yes.
Your Honor, if there's no objection, I'll be tendering Dr. Nakasone as an expert in the field of forensic speaker recognition.
Any objections?
Oh, absolutely none. We
Okay.
encourage the court to accept Dr. Nakasone as an expert. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do you so accept it?
Doctor, tell us a little bit about, you mentioned the methods that a person in your field uses. Tell us a little bit about what those are and how you go about employing them.
According to the scientific working group for speaker recognition recently formulated, the members identified there are a number of methods used. The first one is known as a automated or computer-based speaker recognition, and phonetic-based voice comparison, spectrographic voice comparison, and then oral or by listening comparison method. And all of those, the methods are being practiced by different scientists who are in the different disciplines. Of course, phoneticians will utilize phonetic approach, and the listening approach might be done by phoneticians as well. And the people who are involved in the development of automated speaker recognitions, they are mostly scientists and engineers and computer scientists with advanced degrees. And they reside in the government agencies, industries, private, not only in the US, but pretty much throughout the world.
You mentioned that there are differences between what you referenced as the oral or listening approach and automated approach. Is that the one that involves the computer assistance?
Yes. Even when a scientist might say, including myself, we are utilizing automated method, there is only underlining routine, which is the listening methods. The computer algorithms, that's a mathematical or statistical approach, is highly complicated, highly advanced, it's fairly accurate, but this kind of technology still must be supervised by properly trained examiners.
Let me start with the idea of what kind of sample you need, or a person in your position needs in your lab, to sort of be able to even conduct an analysis. What is it you're looking for?
As part of the standard operating procedures, what we do at the laboratory first, before we do any analysis, would be to evaluate the suitability of the data. And we check and listen very carefully, and then want to make sure speech sample we have at hand are naturally spoken. It will be devoid of disguise attempt. Any evidence of intoxication or effects of alcohol, they must be removed for the analysis. And also we pay attention to the emotional state of the speech. If the person is uttering voice samples with the extreme, happiness, the voice will be too joyous, including lots of giggling and laughter. Those must be removed for the analysis. Sometimes we run into voice being uttered when the person is going through stress or undue depression. This voice must be also removed. And any other unnatural voicing, say like yelling, screaming, or mourning, this type of voices must be removed for the analysis under the standard operating procedures. And when the speech is determined to be natural, then we will check the other aspects of the conditions. For example, the duration must be at least 30 seconds after blank or silence removed. Usually we can do a meaningful analysis if the voice sample is 30 seconds, 1 minute, maybe up to 3 minutes or so. After 3 minutes, the performance sort of hits the ceiling. But when the speech sample, say, drops down to only 10 seconds, 14 seconds or so, examiner has to conclude that the voice quality is not, duration is not really good enough for us to analysis. And then we will also check the amount of reverberation included in the speech. If there is a long time reverberation in the recording, we remove. We do not proceed to the examination. Another thing is that suppose we have two voices to compare. One coming from recorded, incriminating recording, and the other voice is coming from suspect voice recorded in the quiet room, whereas incriminating voice was recorded through telephone line. And if that telephone line has a bad quality, these days, most of the telephone, especially landline, carries decent quality. It can be usable, but depending upon the cell phone type, poor type of cell phone, that distorts human voice. And when we have to confront this kind of disparity between the two voices we are comparing, the examiner is mandated to stay away from further analysis.
So you've talked about sort of some of the factors that affect your ability to conduct an analysis. I think you mentioned that there are variations in what is going on with the speaker in terms of their mental state or their physical state, their emotional state, the way that the speech is expressed. And you were just talking about sort of variables that could go on with the mechanism of the recording, the cell phone distortion and that sort of thing. Are there other environmental factors the distance between the recording and the microphone, for example. Are there other factors over and above just those with the speaker and the microphone that could have an effect?
Yes, thank you for bringing that up. The effects of the distance to the voice is also regarded as a something we have to be careful. There are two terms to describe those. The first one is a far field recording versus near field recording. When we typically talk on the phone, our lips are very close to the microphone, maybe an inch away. That's a typical near field recording. It captures our voice very clearly. On the other hand, when the person is, say, far end of the room, and they are, say 10 feet, 15 feet away, we call this voice, when captured by recording system, we call it, far field recording or far field voice. And far field voice has problems because not only the weakened signal, it has a noise convolved with it, mixed with the noise created by the room, and also reverberations and echoes created by multiple bouncing walls. That sort of smears the voice. And another thing is that far field voice tends to have very poor signal-to-noise ratio. Signal-to-noise ratio is the ratio of signal divided by noise plus signal. Say like in this courtroom, the signal level, when we measure it by sound pressure meter, it might give something like 40 dB decibels. And I'm talking probably with the total of about 80 dB loudness, and the signal to noise ratio is sort of it's a logarithmic expression, but when we do a calculation in dB, we just use subtraction. So 80 minus 40 gives me the voice. My voice will carry about a 40 dB signal to noise ratio, and that's what you hear. And 40 20 is 100. Okay. It's more than 1,000 times. My voice is not louder, 1,000 times than the ambient noise you hear. Now, typical telephone conversation carries anywhere from 20 to 30 dB signal to noise ratio, but when the person's voice is far field, that would become something like maybe less than 10, 5 or 6 dB signal to noise ratio. And that kind of level of the signal is not really suitable for analysis by computer approach. It doesn't preclude human listener though. Human brain or human has better system to analyze that kind of poor signal.
Let me ask you more specifically about the samples in this case, State versus Zimmerman. Back in March of 2012, did you receive some recordings to attempt an analysis on in this case?
Yes, sir. The copy of the report that I have in front of me indicates that the operational technology received from Tampa FBI field office a request to analyze this particular case on March 23rd of 2012.
And how many recordings did you receive altogether?
Altogether, 8 recordings were delivered to us in a CDR, including 2 pertinent recordings in this case.
As far as this goes, what I'm going to focus on now is what we've called or talked about as the Lauer 911 or the 911 call that contains what sounds like a person screaming or yelling. You're familiar with that one?
Yes, I am.
Okay. As far as that call goes, tell me what you did when you got it and what you were able to do with it.
The case was assigned to me to do voice comparison portion, and another examiner was assigned to do something else, but I'm going to concentrate on what I did.
Yes, sir.
By following this standard operating procedure, I listened to the entire recording. It was something like a little over 4 minutes. I want to check my note. I correct 4 minutes to 2 minutes, 34 seconds. And out of 2 minutes, 34 seconds, the pertinent portion was somewhere around 45 seconds, starting from the beginning of the recording until there was a loud noise, almost like a gunshot-like audio event. And that duration was about 45 seconds. We listened to the entire conversation exchange between the female caller and female 911 operator. And when I was listening to those conversation, of course I could hear the voices going on in the background, altercations, somebody is yelling for help. And that yelling or screaming, let me call it screaming. Screaming goes in and out when the dispatcher and the female caller were talking, and sometimes the screaming comes up isolated from those. But since we cannot really analyze any voice which is stepped over by something else or superimposed with other people's voice, I discounted those in the area and came up with somewhere a little less than 3 seconds. 2.53 seconds of screaming was sort of standing by itself.
Let me make sure I've got this clear, Doctor. There were, as you referenced, in that 45-second portion, there was a series of that, what you've described as a screaming noise. How long total, both what you call stepped on and unstepped on?
Total, if I combine all of those segments, it reached a little less than 19 seconds, 18.80 seconds or so. And of those, 16 some seconds were completely overlapped by other voices, and less than a little 3 seconds, 2.53 seconds was the only area where nothing else but screaming was coming through.
And what were you able to do with that amount of sample and that type of sample?
We checked, and I have to render my final conclusion. That type of voice sample or utterance is not fit for the purpose of voice comparison. And this is a mandate, and this kind of judgment is based upon the research and also common sense type of understanding among scientific communities.
So you concluded, based upon finding out what you told us about 18 and 16 in about 3 seconds and the type of recording, that you couldn't make a comparison. Am I understanding that right?
That is correct.
Is there something about the nature of the sounds itself, independent of the shortness of the sample or the other complications that you've already discussed, that also made it harder for you to be able to even conduct a comparison in this case?
In this case, signal-to-noise ratio of that particular screaming was very poor, and that was due to the distance between the telephone set in the premise that female caller was using, and presumed location where altercation was taking place. But of course we didn't have any visual information of those geometric information, but by listening we could tell that was far field recording. And there was another slight slight reverberation was also contained in that, screaming.
Doctor, independent of whether you can compare a sample like this to a known sample of someone's voice, which you said you could not in this case, are you able to, what sorts of things are you sometimes able to tell about determining the age of a person who's giving a sample?
It is common belief among scientific communities attempt to guess the age of the person from a recorded voice is rather complicated, and often we can tell, we can approximate, but very often we know people make mistakes. When we hear on the phone someone's voice, say a young man's voice coming through, and I may think, oh, this guy is very young, 20 years old probably, but it can turn out to be 55-year-old, talking. Or sometime I listen and I judge. I think everybody may have gone through this before too in your life. You may think that this man is very old, maybe 30, 35, but he can turn out to be only 18 or 19. And this also depends upon the individual too. So guessing age is a little complicated.
Tell me what you know about, for example, just the generalized parameters of the pitch of a voice and what that means as it relates to ages, genders, and stages of development.
The pitch is, well, let me just define quickly. Pitch is the psychological perception of actual vibrations of a vocal cord. Say like when I'm talking in this courtroom right now, probably my vocal cord is opening and closing approximately 100 times per second. So 100 repetitions of the same thing per second is called 100 hertz. And maybe 120. The average pitch of the grown or adult male is somewhere around 120 hertz. Now, on the other hand, the average adult female voice has about 220 hertz per second. It's twice as high as men. Now, on the other hand, a small child produce somewhere around 400 hertz on the average. Small children has the highest pitch. Now, these are of course based upon the speech samples while everybody is talking in the normal speech, carrying out conversation. This pitch goes all over the place when someone in extreme conditions, say like roller coaster ride or a pilot's voice right before the crash to the ground, or somebody who goes through extreme emotional status. The pitch is known to raise way higher into 500, 600, 700 hertz, regardless of the age. And normally, we are accustomed to hear a person's pitch, but there is another phenomena along with it. When we speak, pitch is the baseline. Pitch is sort of a source of energy, but the reason why we hear distinctive sounds from me is not because of the pitch. It's created by resonance patterns created by the tube formed inside human vocal tract. The tube starts from the lips all the way down to the top of the vocal cord. It's somewhere around 15 to 17 centimeters or so. This tube is constantly changing and it creates resonance. And that resonance can be also changed when the person uttering something under extreme emotional state.
Doctor, have you yourself made attempts and actually taken exemplars and been able to estimate the age, or at least the general age of a speaker with prior samples?
It occurred to me, but I decided it was not possible to determine
On this one?
on this particular case.
But you've done that before?
Yes, I have analyzed the variety of voices in the past.
And sometimes you're able, and did I understand, sometimes you're not?
That is true. I have analyzed voice coming from 16-year-old young man against the 20-year-old man. I don't quote the case, but we were able to identify the voice. And in other cases, more often than not, we not recommend to police department or FBI field office, do not try to get voice samples from a young boy who are going through potential voice change. And this puts some sort of very special, unique situations, because depending upon individuals, one person goes through and complete his voice change in a rather short period of time. He may start at 12. He may complete his voice change within a year. But some individual may go through extended period of time before his voice finally gets established.
And that could take as late as how in life?
I can't really quote exact year, but usually voice gets established at age 20, plus minus couple years.
Okay. So up until that time, in your experience, most people are undergoing that sort of change?
That is correct.
Did I understand you to say, too, that one of the complicating factors in determining age is this concept of residence and what phone recordings and that technology does to your ability to accurately determine all that?
I'm sorry, could you please repeat the question?
Sure. Did I understand you to say earlier that one of the things that affects the ability to, for example, get a better read on the age of the person making the voice sample is when it's a recorded sample that other of those factors enter into the recording? For example, in this case, you've already talked about the distance, the low sound quality, the low sound level, as well as the compression by the cell phone's microphone itself.
The attempt and then accuracy of estimating someone's age by listening to a recorded voice would be about same as listening to live voice, of course, without looking at the face. There will be no difference between the two.
So you think a person hearing it live would have about the same ability as a person who have heard a recording?
That is correct. If the listener is not really familiar with the voice he's listening to.
And I want to get to that because we've mentioned this already a couple times. You talked that one of the methods that you use yourself is what you call the oral, or the listening approach to this, where you tell us a little bit more about what that involves.
There are two types of listening identification. The first type is called familiar voice recognition by listening. And the second type is called unfamiliar voice recognition by listening. The familiar voice recognition happens pretty much every day. I think most of us in this courtroom run into this situation. Say like, when you're in the office and your colleagues, long-standing co-workers are talking around the corner. You can see them, but you can tell right away, hey, that's Paul and Joe talking. And this is so-called familiar voice recognition. And another thing is that when we listen to a phone call made by our mother on the other end, you really don't have to wait until you hear whole conversations. It's a couple words would make you recognize that's your mother. And this is a typical, the phenomenon happens in our life. It seems to be so easy to do voice identification. But when we go to unfamiliar voice identification, we are talking about listening to, say, hundreds of phone calls every day. Suppose I'm a salesman and talking to hundreds voices. And then one of the voice somehow triggered me. Hey, I heard this voice. And then try to compare that voice with another voice I caught in the different telephone conversations. But I don't know this guy really. And this kind of voice comparison or speaker recognition is part of the unfamiliar voice recognition. And also in the forensic circumstances or environment that I'm in and other forensic scientists are in, we are usually given a voice that was coming from incriminating recording from questioned voice or made in the course of committing crimes. We call it questioned voice. And then we would be given also another voice coming from suspects, and I don't know any of those people. And when I attempt to compare those two unfamiliar voices, that's a typical scenario that every day forensic examiner encounter. And since it's very difficult because examiner don't have in his brain any information stored about the speech features of the voices he's listening to. So the mathematical models or statistics implemented in the computer software must be utilized as assistants to help examiners.
So do I understand then that for unfamiliar voice recognition, which is most of what you do, if you're going to use those other techniques you've described, you need to have the type of sample that you've earlier told us you need. As it relates to just the listening type of analysis, which is, when you have a sample like this, which is going to be more suited for making an identification based on a familiar voice? If we were to have persons familiar listen to it, is that going to be superior, at least for this type of sample, than just trying to do it on an unfamiliar basis?
In this particular case, in my judgment, based upon my experience, it's better done by familiar voice identification by listening only. And as I mentioned before, I haven't mentioned that yet. I'm sorry.
It's all right.
But there is a set of requisites for the familiar voice recognition is regarded, reliable and valid. For example, when we listen to anybody's voice in our life, we intentionally or unintentionally encoding the perceptual features of the person's voice. When he is speaking normally, slowly, excited, emotional, all of these are stored in my brain. And then I also must have an ability to retrieve those features when I'm confronted with a task to compare later voice. And then I gotta have the ability to compare a particular feature generated from later voice against features stored in my brain. So in other words, for this particular case, best approach would be familiar voice recognition by the individual who have heard him in his whole life, speaking, uttering in a variety of conditions, including screaming, yelling under similar setups.
So do I get what you're saying then is it would be better if you were attempting to, a familiar voice identification, to have someone who has heard the potential subject here under a variety of conditions as opposed to simply, say, talking to them back and forth in a courtroom or a meeting or something like that?
Yes, sir, that is correct.
Okay. And that would be about the best approach you could take given this particular sample?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you, Doctor. If I could have a moment, Your Honor?
That's all the questions I have.
Okay, thank you. Cross?
Good morning, Dr. Nakasone.
Good morning, Mr. West.
Nice to see you again. If I could have this marked, please. Here, I would like to approach the witness.
If you'll show it to counsel first, please.
See me. This is Defendant's Exhibit FF for identification.
Yes.
Are you familiar with that?
Yes, this is my curriculum vitae.
And in addition to the training and experience that you talked about a moment ago, does this contain references to your publications and research and other life experience as a voice expert?
Yes, this lists my professional affiliation. I have about half a dozen of memberships in the technical associations. And also, this lists the award that I received in the past, including FBI Director's Award for the development of automated speaker recognition system. And it also lists the my current effort in establishing a scientific working group for forensic and investigatory voice speaker recognition. And that scientific working group was formed and launched and kicked off on March 19 of this year. And there are somewhere around 30 to 40 members. Among those, 16 members they are voting members. And the remaining will be advisory members. And bulk of those memberships made up of highly reputable scientists, both in forensic and in technical field, mostly coming from either U.S. government, federal, state, and also academia and major industry who produces speaker recognition technology.
Let's talk about that for just a moment. That's the working group that you mentioned in your direct examination that you're focusing on now is a group of scientists, speech or voice identification, voice comparison experts that have pulled together to meet regularly in the issue of speech or speaker identification?
That is correct.
How was the group started and what is its primary mission?
The concept of this scientific working group was born in 2009 when the interagency symposium was held, and we recognized that there are lack of consensus or integrated or coordinated efforts in establishing common standard operating procedures. And It took about 3 or 4 years before we can actually form and construct this scientific working group. The missions and the goals of this scientific working group includes the preparation and then the publication of the guidance for the practice of the speaker recognition, and then recommendations for research activities, and also legal advice for the practitioners, and also the harmonization of the variety of speaker recognition methodologies amongst scientists, engineers.
And what is your role on that working group?
I am the elected chairperson of that scientific working group, and there are 4 subcommittees underneath of my chairmanship. One is known as a Research, Development, Test and Evaluation Subcommittee, and another one is the Best Practice Subcommittee, and then third one is Interoperability Voice Standards Implementation Subcommittee. It's just called simply Type 11. And then number 4 is the Science in the Support of Law Subcommittee.
As a result of your work with this group, does that bring you in contact with some of the most distinguished voice scientists in the world, including yourself?
Prior to my earlier testimony, of course, I have not spoken to anybody, but lately I've been getting a lot of emails pretty much throughout the U.S. and also across the world that reputable scientists do agree with me in terms of the analyzability of the voices while produced in streaming. And everybody, most of the scientists believe that there is no validity, and therefore results of the analysis would be utterly unreliable if anybody analyzed that voice for the purpose of voice identification by utilizing advanced electronic device or computer algorithms.
Your working group, did you found this group?
I helped coordinate it and succeeded in getting the funding to establish this. Actually, this particular scientific working group are sponsored by the FBI and also sponsored by National Institute of Standards and Technology.
Is the acronym for that NIST?
That is correct.
And is that the former National Bureau of Standards?
That is correct.
Thank you. The funding came from your efforts and is the funding also, there's a funding participation with NIST?
Yes, NIST, the function of the NIST for this particular effort would be administration of the speaker meetings, activities, and remote conferences, and then coordination of the website. And also they provide technical assistance, because after all, NIST is the one who has been providing technical evaluation of the speaker recognition technology since 1996 throughout the world, and they are reputable in terms of coordinating scientific and blind testing of the performance of technology for voice identification, including not only in the computer domain, but also in utilizing human listening abilities, known as a HASR, H-A-S-R, human-assisted speaker recognition.
Dr. Nakasone, you're talking about NIST's efforts to promote evaluation of these various methodologies that you've touched upon, and so that if somebody has a methodology that could further the speaker recognition industry, they're invited to submit it to NIST as one of their programs evaluation and be recognized by the scientific community. Is that basically what you're saying?
Yes, NIST function, as far as I understand because I have participated since 1998. Every speaker recognition evaluation by the NIST. The goals or missions of NIST, speaker recognition evaluation is promotion of the science, and then evaluation of the technology developed by participants. However, though, they are not really charged with evaluation of the system as applied in any specific areas. They do technology evaluations, but they really do not do yet, as of today, application-specific evaluations. Maybe it's best if I just come up with the analogy, like the automotives. We have engines inside, and that engine could be mounted on any kind of cars, and then perform differently. So NIST sort of evaluates performance efficiency of the engine itself, but they don't really go up to how this engine is mounted in what kind of body style.
Someone, though, who has a methodology for analyzing voices has the opportunity to submit that methodology in a hands-on trial to test the performance. Is that correct?
Mr. West, can you rephrase the question? I didn't understand.
Yeah, I don't want to get too sidetracked. I'm just trying to get a better handle on this NIST evaluation program, where those that practice in the field of voice comparison or speaker identification can participate in this evaluation, where they are given samples to analyze that NIST standardizes, and then they're able to compare their performance with others, for example, that may take the same project on.
I think that is about right. It's a blind test. And then data are prepared by the NIST, and the participants would never have a chance to look at those data until they were given. Once they are given, they have limited time to crunch numbers.
As a result of your familiarity with what NIST does and your experience with the working group that you've talked about, it sounds like you are current insofar as what's happening in the scientific community of speaker identification.
I do believe that I am completely familiar with cutting edge in technology and scientific studies.
And if I heard you earlier correctly, there is no methodology or science that can reliably evaluate screams as to speaker identification at this time.
That is correct. The NIST has not addressed the extreme voice samples like that.
The working group that you talked about includes, you said academics. You're talking about college professors and researchers that don't necessarily run a laboratory.
Yes, in addition to those, we also have representatives from forensic communities. Say like we have representation from DOJ, that's FBI. We have
DOJ,
yes,
the Department of Justice.
that's correct. And we also representation from U.S. Secret Service. We have representation from intelligence communities. I'm not allowed to spell out their names.
It's another acronym, shall we say?
Yes. Multiple intelligence community agencies are also sending representation for this scientific working group as a voting members.
Indeed, you are here, are you not, with special permission of the FBI legal counsel?
Yes, sir. Assistant General Counsel of the FBI allowed me to testify for this particular case.
And as a result, in fact, the scope of your testimony is somewhat limited if either Mr. Manti or I were to ask you questions that may be protected for security reasons or outside the scope of this case.
That is correct.
Is your FBI lab a forensic lab?
Yes.
And I want to just have you address that for a moment. The jury may not know what forensic means in the context of the work that you do. By forensic, I'll summarize it, or you correct me, or that it's with a focus toward evaluating evidence for possible use in a courtroom setting?
There are narrow definition and a broad definition of the word in forensics. And what you just defined is a narrow definition of the forensics. Usually, a lot of people think that any evidence created by a forensic laboratory should be able to be produced as evidence in the courtroom. However, there is another interpretation, which is the broad definition. Forensic simply means the analysis that is being conducted for the purpose of, investigative guidance. Criminal investigation or terrorist investigations.
So in other words, if one of those agencies that's only known by its acronym were actively engaged in investigating terrorist activity, it may or may not ever get into a courtroom, but that would be considered under the broader definition as a forensic application of this science.
That is correct. What they are doing might be using the same technology for investigative purpose by utilizing forensic style. Sometimes forensic style means added rigor of the analysis, and the examiners will be doing analysis and writing report always as if he would be subpoenaed by the court. And everything they write must be substantiated by the evidence, substantiated by the actual analysis. And also, in my area, no single examiner can issue final reports. Usually his decisions, including in this particular case, second examiners have to go through independent analysis and confirm the results. And if there are no confirmation, sometimes, it happens often, the examiner has to move into conflict resolution. And only after there will be a consensus between the two examiners, report will be finally approved and go out.
Is that what you meant when you said a forensic context has added rigor?
Yes, sir.
And in your laboratory, you have other scientists review the work before a final report is issued?
Yes, that's mandated.
And does sometimes that report, or does that work include blind panel testing or blind review of the information?
That happens under situation when we were asked, say what words were being spoken, and that word turned out to be buried in the noise, very signal-to-noise ratio. And when we are afraid that listeners, bias can play into the decision, we'll move into this blind test. The primary examiner will lead this, and the primary examiner called one exam at a time, not without telling him what he ought to be able to hear. And then usually anywhere from half a dozen to 1 dozen of independent examiners will be involved in this type of, a blind test.
And each examiner would listen to the questioned recording or perform his or her own analysis without first being exposed to the opinion of any other analyst?
That is correct. Exposing the other examiners with the preliminary judgment made by the primary examiner would lead to guaranteed bias. So everybody is trained, every examiners in our laboratory are trained not to induce any potential bias.
I take it it's well recognized that there can be that bias, that someone who listens to something at the same time someone else is may be influenced by the impression or the opinion of the person sitting next to them.
There is always danger of biasing others.
And in your setting, you would not tolerate that.
That is correct.
That's not just good laboratory practice, I take it. That would also be good law enforcement practice as they would investigate a case with voice samples.
Objection, Your Honor. That's number one, outside the stated scope, and number two, outside his permitted testimony.
Sustained.
Not law enforcement.
Sustained.
Your Honor, could we be heard on that? I think that's an important issue that this witness is certainly qualified to talk about.
Well, he's already been qualified as an expert when both sides agreed that he was an expert in voice identification. So please move on.
May I make Dr. Nakasone my witness? That was the plan anyway. I'll just call him right this minute as my witness and ask him that question as my witness, not on cross-examination.
He's not here as law enforcement or to testify as to what law enforcement does. So even if you were to do that, there would be an objection, it would be sustained.
Let me explore that then, thank you. Dr. Nakasone, who do you work for?
I work for the Federal Bureau of Investigation.
Is that part of the Department of Justice?
That is correct.
And before that, did you work for law enforcement in Los Angeles?
Yes.
Do you participate in training, both for yourself and to train others?
Yes, I do.
Are the techniques developed in science and in the laboratory to avoid listener bias part of what would disseminate to the field agents so that when they conduct their investigation, they would want to do that consistently with the practice of the laboratory that's ultimately going to be evaluating the evidence?
Our practice at the laboratory is meant to be applied by forensic examiners trained in our own environment, and that is being governed by the Digital Evidence Laboratory, which is accredited by ASCLD, American Society of Crime Lab Directories. Mm-hmm. And personally, I haven't really guided other law enforcement how to do it, except when I'm being asked by special agents, well, Dr. Nakason, I have to do, I have to collect a bunch of people and then ask those people, listen to those voices. I would recommend him because he asked. Please, avoid any talking among themselves to eliminate any potential bias. Mm-hmm. When I'm asked, I provide guidelines.
Mm-hmm. When you're talking about the risk of examiner bias, that could carry over into the field if a subject recording that's being played for people...
I object. Hear the rest of the question and then you can object.
That's being played for people for the purpose of identifying whose voice they are hearing, it creates a high risk of examiner bias if all of the people being asked to identify the voice are played the recording with each other in the same room at the same time, so that each other can see the reactions and comments of each other.
That's not what I would like to recommend.
There's
If
an
I could.
objection.
We are well far afield of even the last attempt to develop this witness's expertise. He said, my training is for forensic examiners, laboratory people. He's not a law enforcement officer, a special agent. He doesn't train them. He occasionally would give advice. Therefore, we're well outside the scope of any expertise that this witness should be testifying about in general terms. If they want to call a law enforcement officer about potential interview bias, that would be the appropriate witness. This isn't. That's my objection.
May I be heard at the bench? I have a constitutional
Yes.
argument to make. Thank you. Dr. Nakasone, I take it, pride yourself because of the work you do, not just with the FBI, but your active participation in the scientific community in this area at large, to know what's going on around the world in the area of speaker identification.
Yes.
And you've already said that among the people that you work with, there is a consensus as to certain kinds of voice samples that are suitable for forensic analysis.
That is correct.
So your decision in this case wasn't based solely on your personal view about what samples are reliable or suitable and which ones aren't.
I strongly believe my opinion is supported by my colleagues in the scientific communities.
Let's talk about, first of all, the suitability of the samples you have in this case, which boils down to the screaming, the cries for help on that recording. When you evaluated it, I know from what you said that you took the total amount of the speech and you said that was about 18 seconds, give or take.
That is correct.
Out of the 45-second period from when the screaming started until the apparent gunshot.
That is correct.
So you distilled that to 18 seconds, and then when you removed the, would it be fair to say, the masking noise or overlapped speech, you had considerably less to work with. In fact, it was under 3 seconds.
That's correct, 2.53 seconds.
And are you saying that it was only 2.35 seconds that could in any way be considered suitable? And I don't mean suitable that it was suitable, but that's what you had to start with to make that decision.
Yes, that was cleanest area if we attempt to do any kind of analysis, not for just voice ID, but any kind of analysis.
When you say that you would like 30 seconds or a minute up to 3 minutes of speech for an analysis, are you talking about normal speech or screaming speech?
Normal, natural conversational speech.
And why is that? What's this notion of phonetically balanced speech?
The computer takes statistics of dynamic variation of somewhere around 1,000, a little bit over 1,000 different speech features. And to formulate sufficiently statistically significant models, it takes the speech sample which contains very extensive phonetic contents. Say like in English, thank you very much. In English, there are 44 different sounds. We call them phonemes. And before those 44 phonemes to occur reasonably, it takes for a while. One word maybe produce 3 different phonemes. So like when I say, S is one sound, A is another. Last part of the Y sound or E sound will be third phoneme. And say someone says help. You have about 3 different kind of sounds, 3 phonemes, H, L, and the P sound. Now, for the entire phonemes, reasonably, comprehensively, and before it happens, we need reasonable speech durations. And that varies depending upon the vocabulary of the individual use. And by doing empirical studies, we determined that somewhere around 30-second speech samples would carry well-balanced phonetic contents.
Are you saying 30 seconds of what you've characterized as normal speech?
That is called in conversational speech.
Not conversational speech, not
Yes.
someone yelling help over and over for 30 seconds.
If someone continues to yell with the same, phonetic content for 30 seconds, we can still count as one word or 3 phonemes. And that's far less than what is being required to do meaningful scientific, analysis.
So when you talk about the duration, the 30 seconds, and I think you said maybe sometimes even if it's only 15 seconds, maybe, or 16 seconds, maybe you can do a voice analysis. If it gets to be 14 or 10, it's very questionable. You're talking about the duration of normal speech that would contain as many of these phonemes that you're talking about.
That is correct. Let me be a little bit clear about the distinction between 30 seconds and 15 seconds or so. If I continue talking like this for 30 seconds or so, and then record it, and then when we analyze, my 30-second speech sample contains a lot of pauses in between, hesitation pause or a syntactic pause, and those in the pause doesn't carry too much information, and after those were removed, you will be end up with having core or bulk of speech informations, and that would become usually either to 70% or 50% range. So if you have 30 seconds of natural spoken speech, it's fair to predict you're going to have in 30 seconds. 15 seconds. Mm-hmm. But you have to measure that after you complete, this extraction of the silence and the pause areas. And if you have, say, 15 seconds, probably examiner would feel comfortable going to analysis. But standard operating procedure mandates, if it's, say, a 10 second or so, examiner has to call it quit. Mm-hmm. Because our empirical study indicates the error rate would go up if we utilize too short of speech samples.
So if I hear what you're saying, if you have 30 seconds of normal speech, by the time you get rid of the pauses and hesitations and such, you may have only 15 seconds left that you can then analyze.
That's the typical scenario we get into. Yes, sir.
Mm-hmm. Is there any amount, well, let me back up first. When you listen to recordings such as the one in this case, are you trying to reach a decision whether the person is under high stress or even in a life-threatening situation?
We assess whether it's normal or deviates from normal range, and examiners are usually have been already exposed to variety of recording conditions, and he is allowed to make that judgment.
You heard the calls and you heard the screams in this case yourself. You did the work.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. And did you consider the person screaming to be in a life-threatening situation?
Yes, it was uttered under extreme emotional state. Facing that situation?
Yes.
Very extreme, emotional state.
Does that make it extremely challenging for you whether there can be any kind of further analysis at all?
Actually, along with our report, we talked to Tampa FBI field agents who submitted this case because he asked. I recommended him not to attempt to record an active screaming voice for this particular case.
I'm sorry, I didn't follow what you said. You recommended that there be another recording or not?
No, I recommended FBI agent that he would not attempt to record an active screaming voice for this particular case.
Let's help the jury follow this a little bit. you told the agent not to attempt to do a reenactment recording for use in this case. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Voice comparison, I take it, while you haven't said it precisely today, is once you get your unknown sample processed and prepared and ready to analyze, the analysis is by comparing it with a known sample of a person's voice. Is that correct?
That is correct.
So you don't ever do the analysis just listening to the one unknown voice on its own, correct?
When we were giving only unknown voice, we are not doing any voice comparison. However, we will be evaluating whether this particular unknown voice has a, is sufficient information in it for us to do, future analysis if we were given another voice samples we have to compare with.
So your decision to tell the agent out of the Tampa office, basically don't bother trying to do a reenactment, was because no reenactment under basically such different circumstances could possibly give you an exemplar worthy of a reliable comparison.
We believe it would be extremely difficult to recreate the same situation. It's not just, the scream voice. It just doesn't have a, raised pitch. Something else is changing too. Scientists believe that potentially there might be some physiological or anatomical structure could be different. When they are different under specific conditions, this resonance mechanism can change too. And since it's not really easy to recreate in the same situation, we don't believe as scientific communities we can recreate these unique situations. It doesn't happen every day. It's difficult.
Screaming in this context is, you're saying, physiologically very, very different than talking but really loud.
That is correct. It's a completely different type. And the scientists do not know exactly how they are different.
So there's really, if I hear you correctly, there's no amount of screaming speech, whether it's 2.53 seconds or 10 seconds or maybe 30 minutes, that would be suitable for the kind of voice comparison analysis that we are able to do now in the current state of the art.
That is correct.
You also said, I believe, that because, I'll connect the dots here if I heard you correctly, because of the physiological changes that come about when someone screams under very high stress in a life-threatening situation, for example, that it has such a profound impact on the way they sound that you can't in any way reliably say how old the person is that's screaming.
I don't think it would be possible to determine the age by listening to that extreme type of voice.
So in other words, the screams that you heard on that 911 call could be made by a 27-year-old, a 35-year-old, or even a 50-year-old man under similar circumstances.
Under similar circumstance, it's very, very challenging. And the scientific community may not attempt, not only myself, attempt to guess or estimate age of the person who is screaming.
And you can't do that in this case.
I did not attempt.
And you didn't attempt because, based upon what you know from your own work, what you know from being a member of the scientific community, that to do so would be a fool's errand, that you can't come up with a reliable scientific opinion because it's screaming, someone screaming for their life.
In my opinion, that's the consensus among the scientific group or members.
I think with all of that, what you're saying is science really doesn't help us in this case figure out who's screaming.
Unfortunately, that is correct.
The best chance, if any, in your mind would be based upon lay witnesses that have familiarity with the voice of either George Zimmerman or Trayvon Martin or both.
That is my opinion. Yes, correct.
Are there still the same challenges because it's very limited speech, because it's under high duress, because it's in the background, and the kinds of things that you've talked about already?
Layperson of familiar voice recognition would be the best, here. But as you mentioned, yes, there is a challenge, and that challenge would be characterized by the fact that this person has a familiarity. The question is, would this person is in possession of the information about specific perceptual features that they can extract from that yelling and screaming to the same features they can retrieve from their memory about their loved ones and voice who were producing the audio information under the same situations.
So the same situation is still an issue. In other words, you're saying if they can connect something they hear in the recording with something that they know is familiar, that's the best chance you're going to get in this case of someone being able to identify the voice.
It doesn't have to be exactly the same, but somewhat, under similar conditions. Yes.
Would you urge caution to this jury as well in that sort of analysis, trying to figure out lay witness testimony that say they can identify the voice because of all the things you've talked about? Would you urge caution in listening to the opinions of the lay witnesses and suggest it really needs to be in the context of the case?
Judge, I'm going to object. He's asking him to comment on what the jury should consider.
The judge will give the instructions to the jury at the end of the case when the evidence is complete, and those are the instructions that the jury will follow. Your objection is sustained.
May I have just one moment, Judge? Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Nakason.
Thank you. Any redirect?
Please join. So, Doctor, what I understand you to say by specific perceptual features is the best type of person to make these sorts of judgments, even on a sample like this, is someone who's heard the potential speaker under sort of similar circumstances.
That is correct.
So they've heard them upset or in distress before.
Yes.
As far, would you say that they would have that kind of listener would have an advantage over someone who's never heard the person upset or in great distress before?
No, that's fine, I'm sorry.
I think the person who has heard same features from both voices would be more reliable than individual who claims he is familiar with certain people, but everything what he heard from this particular person are coming from a normal type of conversation.
Thank you. You referenced talking about standards of desiring 30 seconds or that sort of thing of speech and words. That was as it relates to, and I just want to make sure that we're very clear on this point, all of those standards and things like that, those were as it relates to your desire to conduct a computer-assisted or an algorithm-assisted examination, not the sort of lay listener type approach. Am I right about that?
That is correct.
Okay. And as far as this idea of, because before I leave that point, I think I heard you say earlier that, for example, if you were talking on the phone with your mom, it might only take you a word or two.
That is correct.
Okay.
Doesn't take too long, a few seconds.
And as I want to go back to this idea of examiner bias and why you as a scientist try to avoid it. As I understand it, in an ideal, you try to make things as a scientist as ideal as possible, right?
Yes.
Okay, so you work you attempt to control as many variables as you can. Do you think that law enforcement techniques or practices or things of that nature mirror what should go on in a laboratory?
No, we do not have any saying about what they do unless I'm specifically request to give them guidance, but otherwise, usually, say like we prefer the voices will be recorded by a high fidelity microphone tape recorder, but most of the voices we receive were recorded by a variety of random recording devices. We take them all.
And just so I'm clear on this concept of what you refer to as the potential bias, again, you were talking in context of having a scientist conduct what you called an unfamiliar voice analysis, the computer-assisted or that type of identification where you don't know or have never heard the supposed speaker's voice before, right?
Yes.
Okay. And
however, though, that happens also in the voice lineup situation. We recommend to FBI agents when we asked.
Objection, Your Honor.
Sorry.
May the witness finish his answer,
certainly, I
please?
didn't mean to interrupt you, Doctor. Were you done yet?
No, he wasn't done yet.
Please avoid your comments.
Yes, Judge.
Go ahead, Doctor, you may continue.
I said the effort guide them to remove any bias effect happens not only to the technical analysis for unfamiliar voices, but also it is equally important. The same, safeguard against bias would be as important in the familiar voice recognition as well. To remove risk of bias and also to improve the credibility of the results of this, identification procedure.
If I heard you about voice lineups, you're talking about a situation where possibly a victim of a crime is asked to come down and listen to potential suspects say what the perpetrator said? Is that what you're talking about, a voice lineup?
Yeah, that would be part of that too.
Okay.
But sometimes it happens there's not enough, quality in the very lengthy, voice recordings happening in the, federal cases. And I recommend only thing they can do would be to find somebody who are familiar with the voices, and then advise them if they have, say, 3 or 4 potential individuals who presumably familiar with the voice, advise them to have each listen to the recorded voice of the target individual separately, one at a time. That's
If-
part of my recommendation. Okay.
If we're talking about the potential for bias, that is exactly what it is, right? A potential?
Yes.
Okay. If I were to have you and another person familiar with your mother's voice listen to it together, are you worried that that would compromise your ability to recognize someone with whose voice you are so familiar?
Well, there's always a chance.
Okay.
I might get compromised.
When you say there's a chance,
Yes.
certainly doesn't mean it's going to happen, does it?
Objection, leading.
Ma'am, if two voices at hand we have to compare are so obviously different, or so obviously same, the chance of examiner bias might be lesser than the situation in which two voices sound alike or very difficult to analyze. And I think the examiner's human, they have a tendency to sort of follow the leader. And that happens, and the bias issue is a very serious, topic embedded within the scientific working group for speaker recognition as well. It's a very serious issue.
Does bias work both ways? And by that I mean, if you go into it not wanting or assuming that you're not hearing the same voice, does it?
It can go either way.
Okay. As far as familiar voice identification goes, understanding the frailties of this particular tape, understanding that what you've said is the more scientific computer-assisted method doesn't provide us with enough here. Did I understand your testimony to
Yeah,
be?
that is correct. Because the computer, there's no way for the computer to contain all sorts of features coming from the voice it's analyzing. It's just a one-shot analysis.
So if you've only got that one shot, the best person to do it is someone who's heard that voice under similar circumstances.
That is correct.
Thank you. No other questions?
Very briefly. At the FBI lab, you don't limit your analysis just to the computer, is the automated speaker recognition. Is that correct?
That is correct. Our approach is called hybrid approach. It's a method of automated speaker recognition by computer supervised by a trained examiner. And this means the numbers regurgitated by the computer alone cannot be utilized as a source of a report. The examiner will be conducting his examination independently from computers, because human can extract some features that the computers cannot, and vice versa. So always those two components moving together.
In other
It's
words,
called automated speaker recognition with human in the loop. That's another term.
you always have a trained examiner listening, in other words.
That is correct.
And your examiners are trained in the various methodologies available for speaker recognition.
That is correct. The computer cannot really assess whether input and voices are produced under influence of alcohol, or computer cannot tell right now whether the person was happy, sad, or voice was produced under abnormal duress. So to detect all of those, we have to depend upon the trained examiners. So these two components must go hand in hand in our practice at FBI.
You mentioned that the spectrographic analysis was a method that was employed at more in the past than currently. And the FBI does not currently use that approach, is that correct?
It was used up to last year. FBI modernized the speaker recognition technology on May 15, 2012. So examiners would not use spectrographic voice comparison anymore for the purpose of voice comparisons. It's been replaced by the advanced modern computer software.
Mm-hmm. Based upon your knowledge that the event in this case occurred on February 26, 2012, is there any methodology that you're familiar with that would include the oral perceptual methodology, the spectrographic analysis, or the automated speaker recognition software approach that the FBI now uses that would be suitable for analyzing the screams that we had in this case?
No.
Thank you, Doctor. That's all I have.
May you redirect?
Suitable
Redirect?
suitable for scientifically generating a report under your protocol. When you say there's no suitable methodology, is that what you mean?
Yes,
Okay.
there was no technology or scientific device, algorithm, software were suitable to analyze the particular voice we had. But that would not preclude familiar voice recognition by the individuals who are familiar with the voice.
Thank you.
Thank you. May Dr. Nakasone be excused?
Yes, Your Honor.
Thank you very much, sir. You're excused. Is
Thank
this
you,
a good-
Honor.
Thank you. Is this a good time for a recess, a break? Okay, we'll be in recess for 15 minutes.